What's up, guys?
It's Rowan.
It's Terry.
Bringing you our annual HSC Economics Exam predictions. This is a very requested video, Terry.
I feel like every year it is, right?
Yep, I know I've had lots of students emailing us saying, when are you going to do them, when are you going to do them? Well, they're here, finally. Now, in this video, what we're going to be breaking down is our predictions for both the short answer questions in terms of the topics and the essays. Mm-hmm. Before we jump straight in, any disclaimers we need to make, Terry?
Yeah, couple of disclaimers, as always, is that these are just Rowan and I's predictions. Now, obviously, we have decades of combined experience teaching the economics course, completing it ourselves many years ago. And so while we are trying to, make predictions based on how things have been evolving in the domestic and global economy, based on what things have been currently assessed and what has been under and over tested, we did kind of want to get to that oftentimes you could go either way when we got to that idea of under versus over testing. So that's the disclaimer. It is just our prediction. We don't have the paper in front of us as much as we would have liked to. But it is designed then, I guess, just to assist you.
That's right, to help you prioritise your study. Now, what I would say is we have a pretty good track record in helping students get the topics that they need to focus on. So last year we got 3 out of the 4 short answer topics. And for the essays were a little bit weird last year. And that's a bit of a trend in the papers that are making it a little trickier to predict. But we did get 3 out of the topics. We just didn't get any slam dunks on the questions. Typically, though, we've been doing this for a decade now. And over the last decade plus, we've seen roughly 2 out of 4 shorts, 2 out of 4 essay topics.
And I really like those odds because at the end of the day, you only have to complete 2 of the 4 essays anyway. You do have to complete all short answers. Yeah. But when you are only doing 2 of the essays, the fact that you said last year we got 3
of the topics,
then there probably was a subset of students out there that if they watched our video, they would have been fully prepared topic-wise for both their extended.
Remixed in different ways, which, as we're going to talk about, that's going to be a bit of the theme of some of how we're trying to approach the predictions, because the papers have been changing. So look, with that sort of caveat, in terms of this is just a guide for you to use, and there's a track record here, though, at the same time that's positive. Let's start looking at what our predictions are. And as we do that, we'll certainly unpick exactly the rationale and how we think about this so that you can make an informed decision as well at the end of the day. Now, Terry and I don't agree on everything.
Yeah.
Which will make today more enjoyable, I think.
I don't think we've ever agreed 100% on anything.
So, we'd love to hear your thoughts, right? Like Team Terry, Team Rowan, which questions do you think, right? Based on your own analysis, maybe what your teachers shared at school, you think are going to be included that maybe we've missed as well, right? Because I don't doubt that your teachers probably got some really great insights as well around what they think is going to be in the paper. So with that, let's jump in. Terry, I think for this first one, we actually both have an agreement for the short answers, right?
Yeah, I think I'm just, as we were saying, even when we do agree on the topics, I think sometimes we probably do still differ in terms of what we think is going to be in that short answer, because you do get 10 marks. It's usually that 10 marks is broken into about 3 or 4 questions. And so when Rowan and I have agreed, well, first of all, I'll just say what it is, just some suspense. It is exchange rates. We do feel that exchange rates will feature as a short answer. So we've both chosen that one. I'll go first and then Rowan can follow on with what he's thinking. My logic is that I just think that it's generally always kind of in the paper somewhere, whether it's a short answer or an essay. Last year it was an essay, and it was a very interesting essay. So as Rowan was saying earlier, that they've come up with these really interesting ways to remix the question. So if you are curious and you don't want to go and find last year's paper, it was about the effects of an appreciation only, and I found that super interesting because it wasn't the most open and broad question. It was actually quite specific. With that in mind, but without getting to the essays yet, I think for me, then I do see it as a short answer. And what I also feel like is there's a lot of really interesting things that aren't necessarily related to impacts or causes of exchange rate fluctuations that you can go towards. So from my understanding, I think something more along the lines of the comparisons between the different systems of exchange rates you can have. So for example, the managed versus the flexible. And also even things like the RBA's intervention into the exchange rate. I think these are two quite undertested, and we will
Massively undertested, yeah.
We will use that word a lot today. Undertested areas of the syllabus that I think it's a good foil from going from last year, which was very common, like the appreciation stuff, to now going to some more low key exchange rate areas. So that's me. I think very, very kind of mechanical side of exchange rates, not so much on causes and effects. Rod, what do you think?
Yeah, so, and I think one of the things that I look at is like patterns in the papers, right? I'm very interested in looking at exactly how frequently is this tested, and that both can be a positive for it being in and also a reason not. So if something's being tested a lot, it's also likely it may get tested again, but equally it could mean that, well, we've tested it so much, we're not going to test it. So it can be tricky as a result sometimes. So what I've seen is that exchange rates has appeared somewhere in every HSC paper since 2018. Okay, so it's been every single year for 7+ years now. Now that's a short answer or an essay. Now note, it was a short answer in 2018, 2019, 2021, 2022, and 2023. So, it's often in short answers. Last year was the exception, which means that I think if it's going to be in here based on the sort of likelihood of it appearing in the paper, it's probably going to appear in the shorts. Now, it was in the Catholic 2025 trial paper as well, so I think they sense that, maybe it's going to be a short answer. Now, where it could get combined with, so I think the trend is that increasingly short answers didn't used to be like this. If you go back and look at older papers, you'd get a short answer question and it would just be singularly on that one topic. Now it's often that it's being connected with a separate topic, particularly in the 5 marker, maybe the sort of bigger marker short answer. Where could that be? Well, I've sort of thought that there's 2 possibilities that they could connect it to, and this is where I differ with Terry, right? So I think external stability is possible. It was last assessed in essays in 2019, 2020, 2021. So it is a bit under-tested, external stability, as a concept. It's never really been tested in SAQs. So this is where I'm going out a bit on a limb, right? It's like never been tested, under-tested. The sort of counterpoint here, though, is it's not as much of a topical issue right now. But in saying that, we haven't really explored the sort of dimensions of a CAS that we had temporarily, the significant improvement in our net foreign liability position. So there are some opportunities, and the dollar plays into some of that. The other area which is connected is balance of payments. So this was last tested with the Australian dollar in a short answer question in 2023. So it makes it slightly less likely they're going to do, again, Australian dollar and balance of payments after it's been done so recently like that in 2023. They did do exchange rates with globalization in 2022. So you can sort of see that there is a trend where they're combining exchange rates with another topic area. So thinking about all of that, I'm like, well, I'm going to cross off balance of payments because it was done recently. I'm going to cross off globalization because it was done recently. The final area that I thought was potentially with Australia's direction and value of trade. Thinking like, okay, the impact that, the value of the dollar might have on our terms of trade. There's some interesting sort of connections there. And equally, it's never been combined in that way. They've never combined sort of a question with the dollar and then looking at like value of trade. And so I thought that was probably, if I had to make a pick, it was maybe external stability, but probably like trade and value and direction of trade could be a stronger pick there. Now note, the Catholic paper did have a balance of payments external stability question on its own in the short answers, and the Independent had combined balance of payments and exchange rates. So, there's something in there in brushing up, I think, on balance of payments and external stability potentially. But yeah, I think exchange rates and plausibly external stability or direction of trade and value of trade is probably my picks.
So yeah, I think that's really, really well covered. I think you've basically gone through most of what is in topic 2. I do feel the same way in terms of things like the balance of payments and external stability kind of featuring, and so I've just got them in other parts. Of the,
and I think that's what you're going to see. Like, I think if I was to observe Terry looking at both our predictions, we're actually pretty aligned mostly on the topics. It's just where we think they might appear. So the good news for you is, regardless of whether or not, you think it's exactly going to be in one or the other based on what we say, what we're probably giving you anyway is a good hit list of stuff to revise that you'll be covered either way if it's in shorts or essays. Yeah. So let's go on to the next one, because the next one is one where we disagree. Yeah. And again, this is the perfect one where we actually have picked these in different parts of the paper.
Yeah, speaking of the devil, as we just mentioned. So moving on to the second short answer, we've both taken this as one of the topic 4 economic policies and management sections, which I think is interesting as well because it was featured quite heavily as the extendeds last year. And so I did also notice that there is a bit of a pattern, I should say, of where the policy generally is always in most papers, but it's just in terms of where they've chosen
where it goes. Yeah.
So interestingly, Rowan and I both feel that there's enough, space in the paper where they can just do a completely isolated short answer question on a policy. And the only difference is just what policy we've chosen. So the policy I went with was monetary policy. Okay, and I think there's always really interesting things that if you don't examine it in an extended response, I think are really interesting to examine in a short answer. In particular, why I've gone with monetary is I think that is one of the most interesting policies in terms of its limitations. I think there's a lot of time spent in school where you're looking at all those issues in terms of things like the time lags, the fact that it's a blunt instrument, and also, obviously the performance that monetary policy has had in recent years. Now, I do feel that the HSC doesn't try to get too caught up in, potentially spicy areas, but you can always just put a little table that just has a few fake numbers and go for your life. So, hypothetical economy has achieved this, and this, and go for it. Go and be critical about how it's performed. Now, it may or may not look similar to what our numbers are. Who cares? At the end of the day, I just think there's a lot of really good stuff that...
Also implementation stuff, which hasn't really been... And I know we talked about this, because I think we've tried picking this in the past, actually, because we thought that, monetary, there's been a lot of change, particularly around how it gets implemented with the corridor. That hasn't really been assessed.
And it's kind of getting to a point, Rowan and I think we were going to eventually get to this, which was that this is a syllabus that is on its last legs.
Yeah.
So the reason, to go back to what you were saying about, they're finding all these really unique ways to combine topics, it's because they've run out of things to really assess. So I love that you brought that up again, because, like, as you said, the implementation and the actual mechanics of monetary policy, I think would be a great way to kind of finish off and send off this syllabus.
That's right. And it works well in a short answer format as well.
Yes.
So, I think, this one was, again, it was one where I disagreed with Tara. I have disclosure. I've got monetary later on in the paper. But I also think it's going to feature. And so I think it is one that if you've been a little you haven't done it as well as you should have at school, it's worth covering.
And if I don't mind just kind of letting my own experience here as a school teacher, it often is a course that is not done very well, because unfortunately a lot of teachers go into that, we taught you that last year mode. So they go, we taught you that in year 11, so we're not even going to spend a lot of time. I know I'm certainly guilty of this.
And it gets squeezed in if you're doing a linear sort of structure in your school. Topic 4 does get squeezed, unfortunately, and it's why schools will make the decision to go, we did this in year 11, let's do the stuff that we haven't yet covered.
Guilty.
So, I get it. You get no judgment here. It's just, it is what it is, right? I've taken a slightly different approach. I've identified microeconomic reform. Now, no, this is one that I think Terry has put somewhere else in the paper. So we'll discuss that when he gets there. Now, this was assessed as part of a macro-micro mix essays last year, but it's actually broadly an under-tested area of the course. So particularly micro in its own. It will get tested maybe through labour market, through enviro policies. It can get tested in other ways, but micro, particularly if we're thinking about the lens, let's say, of regulation, deregulation, that doesn't often get looked at. It was last tested in short answer as a full focus on micro in 2020. In 2021, it was a part of an inflation question, short answer question. But then it was in 2018, 2014, 2008 in short answer. So I worked out roughly every 4 to 6 years, it sort of appears as a short answer question. Now, it's its 4th year since it appeared last time as a short answer, which means that if we just go roughly on that, it's probably due. I also think that there's been a fair bit of micro reform occurring under the Labor government in both their first and now their second term. I mean, think Future Made in Australia as an example, right, of some sort of micro reform that's designed to create structural change. But there's a whole lot more that's been happening. And so there's that, and there's also the fact that productivity growth has been on the agenda, and not just recently, like it's been really bubbling for some time. And so I think just for some of that, I think, it makes it plausible. Now, as an essay on its own, it has been assessed in 2019, 2015, 2011, 2009. So no, I've made a comment here. It is also very undertested as an essay. So what I'm saying, and I think Terry will unpack this later on when he gets to the essays, is that it's a pretty good bet somewhere in this paper. So if, you and Micro are not good friends, which to be frank is most students, my observation.
It's a tragedy.
Yeah. I think you should get a little more friendly with Micro over the next sort of, period of time before your exam.
So I've got lots to say about Micro as well, but I'll save it.
Save it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let's go on to the next pick, which I'll throw to you, Terry, which we have a disagreement on.
Yeah, we, again, so one thing that we don't disagree on is, of course, the fact that typically they cover one topic per question.
That's right.
So we've now kind of gotten to our topic 3.
That's right.
The economic issues. So the economic issue that I've gone with is the environmental sustainability / policies, because I do feel like that's always a very kind of natural marriage, which I know I am being a bit vanilla here, not being too creative, courageous, whatever, but I do feel that it was pretty much something that was covered very recently as a short answer as well, if not even last year. And so I know it's not the most brave pick, but I just...
it was last year.
Yeah, but I just feel like one thing that we haven't touched on today is just when things aren't done particularly well, and in fact, your teachers do get data on this as well. They get data and they can see how students have performed across all the different syllabus points. The environment always pretty much sticks out as a sore thumb.
Yep.
And so unfortunately, I do feel like it would be the candidate of the short answers of last year to be due for a repeat. And so that's why I've just put it in here again. But
and again, you've got some good stuff you can do. Externalities, market failure. Again, it lends itself well if we're thinking about parts of the course that do work in shorts quite well. It does.
I think last year's question there was a little thing about electric vehicles. So I think, there's, like, as Rowan said, there's so many other things they can pivot towards that aren't electric vehicles. And so I'm just expecting it to be somewhere in the paper, because I think the stats that you've looked up, it's been in every paper since 2018.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I outside of putting it as an essay, I've got it in here again as a short answer.
So I've made a slightly, maybe, it's funny because at both levels, like, your pick is both brave and not brave, and my pick is both brave and not, but both for the different reasons, right? And I'll explain what I mean. So Enviro, because it's been in the paper every year since 2018, means it's like plausible, right, that it's going to be in, but because it was a short answer last year, it's like, will it be there, right? Which is why I mean it's like brave and not brave, right? Where for myself, like, I'm sort of going, well, it was a short answer last year, so it's not going to be this year, right? Like, they're not going to do that, even if it's been in the paper every year. So I don't think Enviro is actually, I'm making the call that and this is a big call, I actually think this might be the first year Enviro is not in the paper.
That's a big call.
I know, and we'll talk about that when we get to the essays, okay? Because I think that's where, like I was saying, like that's maybe, I might be shooting myself in the foot. Anyway, what do I pick? What have I picked for this one? I've picked unemployment. So a couple of things. This was assessed in the independent trial this year in short answers. Unemployment in and of itself has not been assessed since 2020 as a short answer question. It was tested as an essay in 2024 and 2021. So it's actually surprisingly a somewhat undertested topic. You wouldn't have expected that because it just seems to have featured so big in economic discussions, but it is quite undertested, and it's a good opportunity for a calculation based, like you can give you the tables, get you to calculate, labour force participation, the unemployment rate. They can give you a hypothetical economy, like Terry said.
Well, I think that's because they typically love to lump that in the multis as well.
Yeah, that's right.
So that is an unfortunate casualty of being very multiple choice based.
Precisely, and it may yet feature more there, exactly. Sure. But I think there is still opportunities, particularly with like the NAIRU, right, where it can still be brought in if they're going to do some of that in the multis. I think there's still opportunity to do And, the Nauru hasn't really been looked at since 2019. So, and we've been arguably, like, over the last couple of years below, right? Like, who knows what it is, right? Like, it's a talking point.
Yeah.
And so, it's just something that highlighted for me, that it's just very undertested, surprisingly. Now, they could also jam it instead of like that. They could look to combine it with distribution of income and wealth. Because there's correlations, obviously, between the level of unemployment and the impacts on distribution of income and wealth. I think distribution of income and wealth may appear somewhere else in the paper. And I think, Terry, you may think so as well. Same. So either way, right, that'll be a good topic to get coverage on, because if it gets jammed up here in shorts, great. I've gone with unemployment for this one.
Can I just jump in on that as well?
Yeah.
Just really interesting that you do bring up the Nauru and their almost reluctance to kind of engage with it when it's below, when our unemployment rate is below. I'm going to go on a whim here and kind of parallel that with our monetary policy implementation stuff, and just say that when it gets a little bit it departs a little too far from what they're comfortable with in, what's being taught in classrooms, I think sometimes
they just want to avoid it.
They kind of just avoid it. Because you know what, if somebody avoids you for 6 years, probably avoiding you intentionally. So just keep that in mind.
So exactly, which is why there's, I think, plenty of scope in unemployment to not touch the Nauru. It's just it's I think it's just an opportunity that's undertested. So use that if you need to do a prep. So let's keep moving. We've got our final pick.
Yeah, last one, which I think we do have a bit of crossover, but then also a bit that we're a bit different. So this is the top. If you've been keeping track of the topics, this is the topic one question.
That's right. Yeah.
I don't know if you're the same, Ron, but this is not the way that I've done this. I haven't done this necessarily in the order, which I think they'll.
Neither. This is just like. As I've been sort of going through the sort of thoughts.
Yeah. Same thing, because I typically like to chuck this more kind of towards the beginning, early the game.
Yeah.
So I've gone with a combination of globalization and the case study. So I always feel that with this one, it is the most kind of disjointed question. Like, they can just throw, there's 3 chapters if you've been keeping up with your notes. There's 3 chapters in that book. They can just take something from each chapter or each little section of the syllabus without too much synergy between, parts A, part B, and C, which you might see, as Ron was saying, with the exchange rate and external stability, exchange rate and balance of payments. So it can just be a bit of a mishmash sometimes. So I've kind of gone with that approach here as well. And so I found it really interesting that both, I think, the Catholic and the Independent had this topic in their essays.
Yeah, they didn't have it. Yeah, it's definitely not in their.
It's not in their shorts.
But they had globalization. Not case study, but they had globalization. That's right. Yes.
And so I don't really think it's going to be an essay, so I've kind of slotted it in here as a short answer. So I think the takeaway here is that it probably will feature in the paper. Like, as the Independent Catholic think it's in the essays. I don't think so much, but I'm happy to have it in here. Now, I know with the case study, before we before we started filming, I think we were both also kind of on the fence. You were a bit more on the fence about, it's already
I might make another big call on the case study. Okay. But you go for it. Yeah.
So I'm pretty boring this year. I don't know if Ron feels the same. I feel pretty boring. I just think globalization case study would be my kind of 2 main focuses for that short answer. And so they had case study last year, but you know what? Have it again.
One of us has got. I'll take the risk this time, and you, and then that way, hopefully, we're helping students, right? So look, I was reflecting a lot on the case study, and since 2021, over the last 4 years, it's featured somewhere, shorts or essays, right? And that was actually an unusual reoccurrence, because it went through a period of wandering in the desert, right? For many years, where it was non-existent, and for good reason. There wasn't as much happening. Obviously, like COVID and the emergence of the sort of contagion effect that it created, the changes in policies that countries needed to take in response to it, really opened up the case study again to make it, I think, an interesting area to test. Now, in saying that, right, like, it was a short answer last year, and so it was like it was a short answer in 2024, 2022, 2021. I don't think it's an essay on its own, because it was assessed in 2023. So I'm of the opinion, look, like, if I want to be safe, you would assume that it's going to get mashed somewhere in shorts if you want to be safe.
Yeah, which is what
Terry's done.
Saying, yeah.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think they're not going to have it in this year's paper, right?
What makes you feel so strongly?
Well, because, I don't think it's going to be an essay, right? Given it was done as an essay in 2023, I think it's unusual they'll come back to it that quickly. And given it was in shorts last year in 2024, it just makes me feel like they've done it a lot recently. They might be changing it up. My other observation is I've had a lot more students this year, for what it's worth, not get taught case studies in schools.
What do you mean?
Yeah, like more students that are like, yep, we haven't done a case study. Weirdly, right now.
I think that's illegal, Ron.
Yeah, well, not that necessarily impacts on what the examiners are going to choose, right? For what's going to be in the paper. But I've just noticed a trend. Schools are not treating it with the same level of respect that it used to be.
This is the first I'm hearing of it.
Yeah. Well, that's just what I've seen, right? Anyway, so I do have globalization. I do agree. Like, there's going to be in there. My take has been on a slightly different area. I think case study, as I said, I just feel like it's probably been one of those ones that's been like tested a lot, and I think they're going to skip it this year.
Sure.
Big call. Let's see. Now, what do I do think? I think there's areas of globalization that haven't been tested, and one of those is like indicators of globalization. I know that's like pretty basic, actually. Like you go back, it's the first thing that you do in topic 1. I was recently doing some revision, with some Eco students, and like I was surprised to discover that like the knowledge was not there, like it was just like, because it was done so long ago, right? And so I do suspect there is an opportunity to do that. Secondly, though, I also think that there is, an opportunity to sort of look at it in terms of the changes of globalization, the impact on Australia even, right? Like looking at what's been happening. So it's a little bit of a combined one, right? And that's, again, something that sometimes appears in essays, to be honest. But you could see it being done as like the 5 marker, right?
That reminds me, actually, of, I think, one of the very first times we worked together. So,
this is going back.
Way back, that they actually had a question which was explain how Australia has contributed to globalization. That was a big, 6-mark question. So now I think, in a bit of a full circle
That's cool.
way, potentially going...
It could be going back to that. Yeah, exactly. So, look, I think that's like a plausible area where it could go. The only other final connection I thought was like globalization and protection. Again, I think that's going to appear later on in the paper. So it's why it's one that I think it'd be good to familiarize, but I think it's going to appear elsewhere. So yeah, my take is case study. I don't think it's going to be in this year. Big call. I know there's a lot of data to suggest it will be. So if you think it will be, listen to Terry.
And do it. If you haven't done it at school, please go and actually do it.
Yeah, exactly. I think indicators, possibly impacts on Australia, right, is where it'll go. Cool. So with that, let's go to the essays, Terry. And I think, again, we've got some disagreement on a couple here. We've got some agreement on a couple. I think it's 2 out of 50-50 here. 50-50. Yeah, in terms of agreement. So
6-7.
Lead the way. We'll go with one that we both agree on, which I think is that first one that you've got there.
Well, just to clarify again, so when you, in terms of the selection here, have you been particular?
I haven't. No, I haven't.
Okay, because I have. So,
okay. You've thought about which ones would be stimulus versus which ones wouldn't.
Yeah, so...
okay, you know what?
I don't know if you want to hop on that.
I'm okay to leave it as is, actually.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I think possibly out of my 2 picks, there's possibly 2 that might switch. Yeah. And I'll fight that when I do it.
Sure. Yeah. So didn't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, appreciate it.
The first one that we've spoken about was the impacts of free trade and protection policy. So this is what I was saying. Like we both agree that it'll be an essay, but we've got it in different.
This is one that I think could be a stimulus. It could not be.
Okay, I'll
talk about that later.
For me, I do think it's a stimulus, and because one thing I did notice was when they do the policy and issue essays. Basically, over the past 5 years, they tend to do this thing with the economic policy and issue essays is that they'll switch it between stimulus. So one year will be stimulus, next year will be non-stimulus. Then I'll go back to stimulus. Then I'll go back to non-stimulus. So last year it was part of the stimulus. Yeah. Okay, and I don't know if I actually ever told you this, but I was quite intimate with how that was marked. Okay. So I'll leave that for how you want to interpret that statement.
Okay.
And so, look, there was a lot of I think what I will say, if there's one thing that I picked up from people who were aware of how it was marked, micro was not done well. So that's why I'll talk about that later. But just going back to this, I think because it was last year, policies and management and stuff was stimulus. I'm going to throw that in non-stimulus. So what is left over then is my first stimulus choice, which is the impacts of free trade and protection on the Australian economy. Now, I think, Rowan, you've got the nitty-gritty stats. I'll just go off of a couple of vibes that I picked up, which was that it was featured in both the Catholic and independent extended response sections. Okay, so it's a very popular pick for this year. I also just think that part of being in the stimulus, I think it works quite well with the stimulus because there's a lot of really interesting graphs and quotes and tables that can be utilized here. Mentioning tables because there are some great tables out there, if you know what I'm saying. And so, we do have a bit of agreement here. But I just think, just to kind of finish up here, I think there's just been so many interesting things that have happened in terms of global protection without singling out any particular names.
So look, I'm in agreement. So we both agreed on this question featuring. This is where I was on the fence if it's going to be stimulus or not, right? Because it is a topic that equally can be done without stimulus. And so I've probably grouped more traditionally my policy picks as the stimulus questions, and I've put this at the moment as a non-stimulus. But it's a 50-50, right? Like it could easily be in the stimulus. Now, honestly though, does that make a huge difference for you? Well, you're going to get a bit of extra data, right? If it is in stimulus. If not, well, you're just going to have some more stats memorized at the end of the day. Now, what's my pick? What's my sort of an analysis for why? Well, I mean, I sort of agree. It's been in the Catholic and independent, okay? I think the trends are such globally as well that it's so topical. And there's also been a number of really tangible impacts for Australia over the last, not just this last year, if you're talking about, the good old Trump tariffs. Like, even if you look at the impacts of, China and Australia's trade dispute, there's been flow-on effects for Australia and how that has played out. The Ukraine crisis. There's a lot of things that have been going on that I think make it there's a lot you could talk about here. Now, it also hasn't been assessed in an extended response since 2021. So given that so much has been happening, it feels like it's ready for a comeback in terms of the essays. So that's the one we agree on. Maybe we hit one now that we don't. Like, we've got different topics here.
Yeah, of course. So if you don't mind, I'll round out my other kind of stimulus essay here, because when you spoke about this in the short answer, I think a lot of what you said is obviously going to be really important for them to revise anyway. I've just kind of gone the other way. And
you put in an essay rather than a short.
I love, I have a bit of a soft spot for this, so I really do enjoy these kind of essays. So
Same.
When I set it set the trial at my school, this trial exam, I had this.
Popped it in, nice.
It's always in there. So, a bit of a soft spot. So, like I said, I'm going a bit rogue here. So, I haven't really agreed with the independent, the Catholic, or Rowan. So, this is my kind of, I guess, courageous, brave pick for the day. And so, I just feel that my approach is always the coverage of the paper. So, I'm taking, I guess, more of a teacher's point of view here, is that we always love to make sure that everything does get assessed. So,
although technically, free trade protection impact on Australia is
that
a
is
topic
true.
Too.
No, that is true, and
so,
I did think. I did think.
Cool. We'll come back to that.
I did think of that. It's just that what I noticed was that in 2021, when you did mention,
that was last assessed.
When it was last assessed, they still in that year they had a question just on trade and financial flows. So what I'm feeling is that there is, even when there is an essay that will touch on topic 2, I just feel that the teachers are like me. They love topic 2 so much that it needs to be its own essay. And it's a good topic. So for this one, what I've kind of gone with is, like I said, trade and financial flows, and then linking that with the balance of payments. So I'm going to open the door here, because you did say external stability could also be very interesting. So you link that with exchange rates, I believe. But
that's right.
You could certainly still do trade and financial flows and link that with external stability, which would be a bit broader than just the balance payment itself. But I just think that it's a tough question for a lot of students.
It is.
There's always a lot to do. Why I also felt a bit of interest here was, I think you actually mentioned it earlier, that there were a lot of unexplored
There is. It's. I love it. Like, I also love this question. So, you're speaking to me, Terry.
Like, unexplored potential when it comes to the current account. So
because it hasn't really been looked at. And we've actually picked this the last couple of years. So maybe, like, a clock's right, like twice a day, right? Like, in a positive way, like, you've stayed true to this pick, right? And maybe this is the year, Terry.
It's a part of who I am.
Maybe this is the year. Because, like, I think it's... And again, I understand why. This goes a little bit to your point. When things diverge from the norm, they're a little bit hesitant. But it's back.
It's back.
Right? Yeah. We're a current account deficit again, and it hasn't been explored. So I do think it is undertested.
Yeah.
Right? Without a doubt. So I think it's a good pick.
Thank you.
I like it. I have a different pick, but I like it.
Thank you. That respect.
Yeah. The one thing I did want to reflect on, and I just wanted to quickly take a look, was there was, 2023, you had a question that was close to this, right? That was my only hesitancy why I was a bit like, are they going to do it? Although external stability might be where they dial it up a little bit more. Because in 2023, there was an essay, Composition, Value and Direction of Trade on the Economy. So it wasn't explicitly about balance of payments, but let's be frank, talking about those things would entail a conversation, certainly from a Boggs perspective, about balance of payments, terms of trade, etc. So it wasn't as direct. And there was a 2022 essay on the balance of payments and the impact on the dollar. So it's like, look, it hasn't had an essay recently, so there is... and external stability, is part that hasn't been. So, I was torn about it. I did pick a different one. So I picked economic policies with possibly a monetary focus, and that's where I'm being maybe a little more risky. And then price stability. So the reason for this is that inflation was attested in short answer in 2024. It was part of an essay in 2023 and 2022, and then it was a short answer in 2021, and then it was an essay in 2019, 2017. So what I'm trying to highlight is out of the last 8 years, inflation has been in the paper 6 times. So it's not like every year, but it's pretty regularly appearing there. And so then I think as a result, given that it wasn't an essay last year, it may just appear again this year, and it's remained super topical. If anything, it's been more topical end of last year, this year, because of, the ongoing sort of inflation remaining high, RBA pressure to reduce the rate, they haven't. So I thought, that there's a lot you could talk about ultimately. Also with the dual mandate now with sort of full employment, it's just this opportunity to talk about conflicts. The final thought was, okay, is it just policies generally, or are they going to specify? And last year was actually a little bit of a divergence where they did macro and micro. They've tended to usually just go macro or micro, or they've tended to go fiscal or monetary. Now, I went and had a look, and I thought they may possibly move back to like a more traditional macro approach only, also because I think micro will be done elsewhere. But I also thought, they haven't done monetary on its own since 2021. Right? And then it was a short answer on its own in 2019. So surprisingly, for the same reasons that you thought monetary might be a short, I think it's been so undertested actually, and it's such like a meaty big area that I think it could feature in the essays, and they may just specify monetary as the policy. They may keep it broadly and just say economic policies, and then you can pick. But they may. So if you're not as confident with monetary, either way, right? Terry thinks it's shorts. I think it's plausible in essays, like brush up on it would be my take. Yeah.
I do want to also just highlight, I really do like that pick as well. Obviously I didn't go with it, but it's such a great question, when there's, and what I mean by that is you've got room for, students that really, really get their stuff to just go at it. There's so much there. So I really enjoy it. I just didn't pick it this year.
And I think that's the thing is that the questions they're looking at is exactly, they do want to give the students the range to show and to distinguish, right? Like, your high performers, and also enable students that are, not as confident to still put something on the table ultimately. And so it does enable that. Yeah. So let's jump into the next pick. And this is one of your non-stimulus, the final section of the paper.
Yeah. So I think I've been I've gone a little rogue again, just because I know that when you talked about monetary, you were more so inclined to monetary on inflation.
Yeah.
It's not common that they do this. And so what I'm about to suggest is, I think there's going to be an essay in section 4
this is a big call.
Just micro and talk about anything.
Yeah.
The first reason why I'm going with that is because I always feel that you need to give people a bit of a sweetener to pick more undertested or under.
And this is a sweetener. It's like,
it is the sweetener. You
pick whatever you want to talk about.
That's right. Talk about anything. That's why I guess you might be seeing, oh, he hasn't really done that much with echo issues in the rest of my picks. Because I think there's room to just go and talk about whatever you like about micro. I will say this. I do feel that outside of last year, of course, where they had both, any questions that do typically involve micro form do tend to be a little on the easier side. They're very broad, they're very open, not very restrictive. The verbs themselves are often not the most high order either. They're not usually asking you to evaluate and assess.
It's like explain, discuss,
maybe a bit of analyze. Excuse me. So I think for the exact same reason that you know,
I thought micro was a short. So I think that the key here is brush up on your micro. Please do.
And it's a great topic when you really get into it. So I think you mentioned a lot of the things that were going on with the current government. I also wanted to flag just the economic productivity roundtable.
Yeah, that happened. Yeah, I mean that happened post the exam being set. So that's why I didn't bring it up. I'm like, but evidence.
It's great stuff that you can kind of take, because it's just a sign that the country itself is kind of refocusing.
And there's a lot of good analysis you can actually pull from that, because of the productivity roundtable as well. There's been a lot of really great articles, Sydney Morning Herald, The Guardian, ABC, that are looking at like tax reform and should we be looking at the GST again and all these different things, right? That give you some fuel if you were to try to then be sort of analysing a little bit, right?
And I just think when you say that the kind of analysis that you could generate out of this, I think it would be such an interesting essay. I mean, give me a break. I'm sorry, give me a break from all the the stock standards. Let's do a macro on this. Give me something, as you said, boys. I teach at a boys' school. If you didn't know, students who've had that opportunity to really go out there and look at what's really at that cutting edge. These are think tanks and columnists and economists who are really having a good go at it, because it's the first time in maybe 20 years they've been able to actually sit down and go, let's really talk about micro. So I'm big, Ron and I are both huge fans of it. Like I said, I think it's going to be micro, and I think the sweetener is that the verb itself will not be particularly difficult, and I think they're going to give you a lot of freedom to almost just go and talk about any of your economic objectives.
One of the things that they have done in the past, many years ago, for a micro question was and it is in the syllabus, and so that's where you want to look, if they're going to do a micro question, go and look at the Students Learn To section in the syllabus, not the Students Learn About, which is the content. The Students Learn To is where often it's the skills, but they're often their questions, and they're literally word for word questions that they'll take and use sometimes, and so that might be a little clue to look at for where they might pull something from micro. But the question I'm thinking of was where they got you to talk about the impact of micro on product and factor markets. And so they might not, it might be that's a little tricky because you've got to group them, but it's still quite open-ended, actually. I think there's some different ways they could slice it. I think micro will be in shorts. Terry thinks it's in the essays, so, I think it probably pays to brush up.
Can I give one more reason, I think, just why I think it's an essay? Because as I said last year, people who were very intimate with how that question was done with macro and micro on economic growth. What I was told, in terms of what was seen in all these papers, was that the macro was very solid. Let's say you had a 10-page essay, you'd have 7 or 8 pages.
I was going to say 9.
Okay, 7 or 8 pages on macro, and then 1 or 2 on
pretty underdone
on micro, and then 1 page is the intro and the conclusion. So it's definitely something which
an opportunity to retest, as
absolutely, and you add to the fact that it hasn't really been on its own since 2019. So it is. That was their way to kind of, I guess, soft launch. Okay, they soft launched.
Warning everyone, putting everyone on notice. Right?
That's it.
It might be coming.
I think, but it will be coming in full force this year, in my opinion.
Cool. I really like that pick. As I said, I think, I was torn, right? I in the end put it in shorts, but I think it's as plausible in essays. So the other pick I had, and I put this because I've grouped my policies in the stimulus. I put economic policies on the distribution of income and wealth. Now, the reason for this is that, distribution, income and wealth has appeared in every paper across short answer and essay since 2017, except last year.
Ooh.
Yeah. So it's a very commonly assessed. It didn't appear last year. Now, that makes me think, well, okay, it's probably going to appear somewhere in this paper. So again, maybe, I've said it could be jammed up with unemployment in shorts, and that's maybe how they get it back in, right? So I do think it's somewhere in this paper. It's just a question of where. You might decide, I think they're going to do it in shorts. They'll jam it with unemployment, and I'll take one of Terry's essay picks, right? Great. That way you're getting the coverage. That's what we're trying to help you do. But I do suspect it's going to be in this paper. Now, it's also an area that's a very visible issue still in Australia. So if we're trying to think about areas that are super topical, and not just for like a little window of time, but over an extended period, it's remained that way, okay? Now, I think that they may make it, the challenge is I think if they specify monetary for the first one, they then may specify fiscal for this one, right? If they don't specify and they keep it broad and just say economic policies, then I think, it'll be a broad economic policies, and then you can talk about both, fiscal, maybe the conflicts with monetary, and then there's some micro stuff that'll play in here as well, particularly with some of the labour market reforms. So I do think distribution of income will feature with policy. I've got probably slightly less clarity though here around the exact policy you should focus on. Which is why I'd encourage you to just make sure that you've got the ability to think through, across macro and micro, how that may play out on the issue of distribution of income and wealth. And the reason for that is if you can do that and you get micro on all the objectives, it's going to help you for Terry's essay. So, I think either way, it's going to sort of future-proof you for the exam ultimately. So that's my pick. Now, I believe it was also in... it was also in the Independent, but that focused more on labour market policies, not just distribution of income. They sort of focused in on that. It was in the Catholic, actually, with a broader economic policy. So, the Catholic Independent also think distribution of income is an essay. They also don't agree on the policy makeup, though. Yeah. Right? So...
I think that's kind of similar to us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just exactly right. Yeah. So... what's your... Oh, yeah, you've got... Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah.
We have more in common. I feel like every year we do this, we always find that we have more in common.
No, we do these independently, right? So we then come in and we're like, you had that. Oh, cool.
Fancy seeing this guy. That's all I really wanted to say. I think you've covered most of what I said. So it's in the Independents, in the Catholic. They themselves don't have full agreement on how to assess. So... For me, because I'm combining it in my head with that kind of micro question that I had earlier, I know it's a little unorthodox. So usually, I think that what they like to do is if they like both of the stems of the question to be fairly similar. So if it's like one of them focuses on a particular type of policy, then they'll do the other. So one will be monetary, one will be fiscal, something along those lines. But they have gone a little bit. They have gone off-road at times. So that's what I'm thinking for this year. So while the other one that I had was micro on all objectives, which is kind of specific then broad,
You're going the opposite.
Yeah, I'm going something quite broad to a specific issue. So I think, for me, there's symmetry there. And that's, I guess, excuse me, they always do want some level of parity between the essay questions. So I think I'm getting it there. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, just all kind of economic policies, because Rowan was, I'm not sure if they're going to go this way.
Yeah, because it could be fiscal, it could be monetary, it could be open, right?
Could be labour, like labour markets as they had. So so that's what I'm saying. Just broad economic policies on the distribution of income and wealth. Rowan's already covered at length how popular this part of the course is in terms of being very accessible. Yeah. And then the other thing was, I just wanted to, when he said it was very visible, I thought I'd just highlight some of the things that have really stood out to me, which is, in my classroom at school, for example, we've spoken a lot about, HECS debt cuts. We've spoken a lot about TAFE and the amount of funding that's now getting, and finally also just the secure jobs, better pay.
I was going to say, but that's also labour market reform. Yeah, right. Which is that's what I was thinking. I'm like, there's actually a lot of labour market reform that's happened that's speaking to this. So.
I don't know if I'm being a bit cheeky. I'm just going to come clean. A lot of the years that I've been teaching this course, that kind of falls by the wayside by the end when everyone's just thinking of graduating.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
but this was the first in a number of years that I actually slowed down and said, hey guys, let's actually take a look at all these cool things
that are happening here. Yeah. I agree. And so that's why I've went towards, when I was doing the prediction, I originally had, instead of distribution, labour markets. You know, I was torn because I'm like, there's a lot that's been happening here and there's an opportunity to test it. But in the end, looking at the data around distribution of income, I was like, oh, I think it's going to feature, which is why, you know, in my setup, it could be monetary and price stability, labour market and distribution, right? Yeah. If they go specific policy.
There you go.
Cool. Now, I had one other difference to you, just in my core. I know we had like possibles, right, that we'd sort of flagged. My other one here is impacts of international orgs and government forums. And this is about topic coverage, ultimately, as we've talked about. You know, we want to get the 4 topics covered. This was only tested as an essay in 2005 and 2008. So since 2007, I went all the way back to 2007, right? Dang. So it's only ever been tested twice. So we're talking about something that is so overdue for an essay. Now, once again, I get why it's not been tested. For many years, it was like international orgs, like, what are you doing? Like, let's just be frank, right? You guys are messing about, you're not having any impact. I've felt since COVID that there's, you know, just been the unavoidable re-emergence of their roles, right? And certainly, arguably, again, with the rise in, you know, protectionism occurring, it probably starts to create more of a role again for some of these organisations. And there's also been, you know, like levels of financial instability, if you think about the IMF and, you know, so my point is I sense that there's more that you could talk about again, and then it's under-tested. Now, it was a short answer in 2021, but it was only like part of a question there. So if we think about it, like this thing has not been properly really tested since 2015.
You get it maybe as a multi, like one of the first 5 where it's just like who would be responsible for something.
For something, exactly. It's like, you know, giving a loan to like a developed nation or something, right? Like it's not uncommon. So yeah, it does feel like it's just so under-tested. Now, the Catholic paper thought it was going to be an essay this year, you know, so look, I just think it's such an under-tested area that it, you know, speaks to, you know, it needing to be tested at some point.
Well, I actually had this as my other.
As your like possible,
Yeah, so Ro and I, what we love to do is we have our 4 cores and then we do an extra.
Just like a little like cheeky, like, hey, you know, you want to really cover your bases.
So I'll just, again, agree everything with what Rowan has said is severely, severely under-tested. I think I just want to point something out. Something really interesting is for the viewers out there that I have a sneaky suspicion that the reason it showed up in the Catholic paper was that yours truly, right here, wrote a paper in 2024 that was then, you know, circulated.
Cool.
I do believe that I was the one.
Terry's like driving it.
I was the one that made international orgs cool again.
Cool. So, wow. It's making a comeback thanks to this, man.
Yeah. So, and I'm glad you picked up on it.
Yeah.
So
that's cool. Yeah. I think that's awesome.
Look, I've got love for it. Look, what I would say is I think when I'm thinking in terms of a verb, I think something like a discuss or even like a compare.
Yeah.
You know, just like they've done compares and short answers, but to be completely honest with you, I don't think a short answer worth 4 marks is doing it enough justice.
And I think I just want to call out an area that I think needs to get focused on for this question. I was, you know, again with, Year 12 cohort that we're supporting through the HSC at this point, and they had it was a short answer question, which was on, how have it was like international orgs, so they wanted more than one.
Yeah.
Contributed to environmental sustainability.
Ooh.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And so it was a trickier one, to be fair. And they were pretty stumped, right? You know, they had like a little bit of ideas, but like when we zoomed out, I was like, actually, there is if you think about it, like the Paris Agreement, that's driven by the UN. International org, right? If you think about what's been happening globally, you know, the commitment to net zero that we've seen, right? Like happen globally. That's significant if you think about the role that the World Bank's playing in terms of, as part of its, lending policies, you've got to implement, net zero policy. There's actually a lot going on in international orgs now, and it's maybe not in the traditional senses as much of like the WTO driving trade liberalization, because we're obviously seeing a retreat from that. But that's where you get a really interesting, comparison, right? You get, what's the World Trade Organization doing? Well, they're struggling, let's be frank, right? Well, on the flip side, though, you've got, a global commitment to net zero broadly, right? That's being driven by an international organization. So I do think there's something in there in the compare even.
I think you've scared a lot of people, so I might just bring it back. So aside from comparing for the environment, there's also really lovely things you can just compare in terms of, managing fluctuations in the global business cycle. So, environment...
That's maybe how environment gets into this question, right? How I was like...
That would be a very freaky question.
That would be. I don't... Yeah.
Don't know how much of the state would do that.
No, because that's where my possible one was Enviro. And that's where I said, like, I said, look, you know, I was making the brave choice. I don't think it's going to be in the paper because it's not one of my core picks. But, you know, Terry has it picked, and because the data says it's been in, you know, every paper for the last... since 2018.
Yeah.
So... you know, I've been like, well, look, I think it's the time where it's not, but I think if you were really wanting to be safe, right, you know, not go, I'm going to rely on some of, you know, the picks these guys have done that are a little left of center. I want to be safe. Enviro would be one. Whether or not it's an essay, whether or not it's a short, the Terry's picked it, whether or not it sneaks in, which they've been tending to do as part of another question. But that was my other, like, hey, just if you really want to cover your bases, you're motivated, you're feeling pretty good about some of the other topics, get Enviro done. Was there any other final comments, Terry, that you had?
Oh, I think you had an extra short. I don't know if you wanted to...
Yeah, that's where I was making the pick that I thought, like, I was making the pick this year that I didn't think a case study or Enviro was going to be in it.
So,
which was a big pick.
Well, what you're saying is, unlike previous years, we've always had a backup short. Both of us have actually gone ahead and said...
Well, yeah, I've got like...
I'm happy with
I've got like these backups, but I'm sort of saying they're backups that I'm actually saying they're not in my core, right? And they're the safe ones, right? Like Enviro and case studies are safe, at least from the perspective of frequency it's been tested. I'm saying I actually don't think they're going to be in this year, right? But if you want to cover your bases because you're like, oh, Rowan, you're scaring me. Then go and do it. That's why I've left it there for a talking point, right? But I think this is the year that we don't see Enviro on case study.
I've just simply said I'm actually very confident with the 4 short answers I've picked and the 4 essays I've picked.
Okay, just locking in. Great. Yeah. Awesome. So there we have it. As we said, let us know, right? Have we missed some stuff? You think there's something that, you know, is like critical that your teacher shared, that your analysis is? Drop it in the comments below. Of course, let us know, you know, where you agree and disagree. Maybe we've got something wrong and you go, oh, no, guys, like, you're well off for that. We'd love to hear it. Like, it's always fun to have these sorts of discussions. Otherwise, and most importantly, all the best for your HSC Economics exam. You know, hopefully this has helped you at least guide some of your focus and your study. At the end of the day, though, everything's on the table, really. So, you know, make sure that, you know, you're getting the coverage that you need so that you can do your best in the exam. All the best, guys.
Good luck.